everyone, welcome to Squirrel Brain Stories. Just a little reminder right here at the beginning, we're going to be talking about heavy topics. Please make sure to take care of yourself, reach out to a friend if this triggers something in you. Make sure you drink your water, take your meds, and just maybe if you're not in a good place, today is not the day for this, come back to us later.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Squirrel Brain Stories. I'm Angela, and I'm here with my co-host, Buck, my husband, for our retrospective,
something inspective
podcast.
Yes, one of those two. So yeah, this time we're going to be talking about referencing episodes 14, 15, and 16. And this is really the transition from the cult, which I like to say institutional cult, into a more like a family cult kind of, where it moves from the big religious situation into another controlling situation, but it's really in your household. Domestic cult. Yeah, I think that's what it was, right? So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. One of the things that I wanted to talk about that's kind of higher order is like the core doctrine versus, and how they talked about honesty and how they ignored it by and large.
Yeah.
Just the premise of bringing people over the border who are illegal means you're inherently going to have to do a lot of dishonest things.
I mean, you'd think it would come hand in hand.
So looking back on that situation, like, were there a lot of things looking back that were like, yeah, that was illegal. That was totally not, like dodging ice and things like that. Like, did you see that and just kind of not even think about it?
No, I did see some of the things, and I knew that it wasn't right, but what am I supposed to do?
Right.
Who am I going to tell?
Now, and this isn't about trying to like ask why you didn't do anything. It's really just about seeing how often you recognized something wasn't right versus, because at that point you knew right from wrong, and you could figure out.
Well, it's like the one time, when all of the leaders had a meeting with the main cult leader because they caught him coming out of a bathroom with one of the minor girls. She was like 12 years old or 10 years old. And like at that point, I knew someone should have called the police. But if no one else is, then it definitely didn't feel like my place. Like, I don't know all the details. I just know that they caught him coming out of the bathroom with the girl behind him. And he's the married leader,
Did you have discussions with the other women about that?
No.
So nobody talked about any kind of thing. Did you, just sideways glances kind of?
Yeah.
Like, it was never talked about among the women.
No.
Interesting. Even when they were on their own, or?
Well, and I don't know how much of it people actually knew because everything was so secretive.
Yeah. And you couldn't ask questions, and it was.
No.
Interesting. So yeah, I think it's interesting because when you really go and break down the rules of religion, you have the 10 Commandments, right? And those can be boiled down to just a couple, but it's interesting to me how the ones they pulled where women are supposed to follow and men are supposed to lead and do what we say, but the leadership can do anything they want.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it was.
Yeah. It wasn't, you didn't see some glowing example of like faith and honesty from your leadership.
No, there wasn't really honest. I didn't feel like there was honesty.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was really good at pretending to care about his people.
Yeah. I mean, but then you guys are eating, what you're eating, which is leftover food that was donated to you.
Yeah.
And he's going out to restaurants and he's dressing really nicely in whatever clothes he wants. And so that's not leadership. Leadership is being an example and living a life that others can look up to, right? Yeah. That's how I view leadership. You see this over and over, and I don't know, in all kinds of churches. What do you think that is?
Because I think they just get to a point where they enjoy the power, and I don't know, because of their position, they feel above everyone else, so they don't have to lead by example, or they're just so narcissistic that they think they're being a good example and giving themselves excuses for everything they do. That's not right, but in their mind, they're making it right somehow.
It's almost like they feel like they're protecting the work of God from whatever outside influence.
Yeah.
ICE, police,
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. It's quite a trick, though. I mean, the one scripture that I, besides the thou shalt not bear false witness, which is one of the big 10, right? And the whole thou shalt not commit adultery and those kind of things. You have Proverbs 12:22, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. I mean, people were constantly lying. Every time they went outside, they were lying. But I guess that doesn't matter. And then you have, when you went into, I think the interesting thing we can talk about the transition is from the cult, from the institutional cult to the domestic cult, which is Juan's control. Juan was not a religious person.
No.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Never went to church.
No.
Never picked up a Bible.
We went maybe one time, 2 times.
So he was an opportunistic, narcissistic control freak who saw an opportunity.
Yeah, he saw my weakness.
He saw somebody who was pre-trained who he can manipulate to get him to do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
So he was just at the right place at the right time and saw that opportunity. So none of his morality, questionable morality, was really based on any kind of scripture.
No, I don't think he had morals.
Yeah, no, right. He didn't have to justify it. He didn't have them.
Yeah.
Right? So it's interesting, like, how did that transition feel? Did you notice it? Or was the fact that there wasn't a doctrinal background to it, was that refreshing in a way? Or
yeah, it was refreshing not to have, all the Bible stuff pushed down me. And no, it wasn't very obvious. I mean, after everything that I had seen in the cult, I was conditioned, I was just used to seeing bad things happen, bad things just happened and it was okay and it would go away and it would get better, So when Juan started doing all this crazy stuff, I would just, like, okay, it's going to be over soon, it's just, yeah. I don't know. I think it was just a way of surviving.
Yeah. Was there a moment either between the age of 13 and let's say 25 or whatever, 35, where you went from being a believer to knowing it was a charade, but you were still trapped? Like, because at some point you probably believed this was truly the path to God and that you were really doing something, that what you were enduring had a purpose, and it was a higher purpose so you could get back to God. At what point did it at any point come crashing in, like, this is not how God's work would be? This is bullshit.
Well, I didn't think that I was doing it like for God per se. I just knew that, God wanted me to keep my family together. And, I didn't want to bear the weight of, feeling shame for divorcing again, and so I just tried to bear it. And because I knew that, God didn't like divorce, and I heard all about it when I divorced the first husband. from my mom and all of them. And so I was just trying to keep my family together and just keep things on a path, even if it was a self-destructive path. I tried to just keep the family together because I knew that that's what God wanted. That's what he wanted, was for the family to stay together. But at some point, when the abuse really started, after a while of bearing it and just, like jumping in front of the kids when he would try to start hitting one of the kids and protecting them. And it just, at some point, it was just like, okay, this is not a good situation for us to be in. And so that's when I did the thing, opening a secret bank account and having that time I was putting, I don't know, maybe it was $50 every paycheck into that secret account, because I knew at some point I was getting out. I just had to have the money first, because all of the money that came through my paychecks, like, yeah, I had access to the money this time, but most of the time the money was going down to Mexico.
Yeah.
For our retirement.
And that's how
air quotes.
That's how he was able to take all the money from you, is that, oh, this is an investment in our future.
Mm-hmm.
So I take it he would just like take some off the top to pay for your current bills, and then everything else would go down to Mexico.
Yeah.
Did you have a say in that?
I mean, not really.
Yeah. Wow. So it sounds to me, going back to kind of the church religion stuff, it sounds to me like there's a few certain doctrinal truths that you latched onto, and the rest, so you weren't looking at it as an institution. You were looking at specific things that you felt that you had faith in, that you latched onto. So it wasn't like, oh, I have a testimony of baptism and, going to church or reading in my Bible every day. Your testimony was really built on keeping my family together, making sure that I protected them, staying in my marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any other things that you can think of that really you latched onto, that you picked up from the cult?
It was such heavy indoctrination that we needed to do everything according to, what God says in the Bible, because we want to please him, because we want to go to heaven,
Yeah.
So everything that I did, I wanted to make sure that I was doing it to please God, that like I was doing everything right.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to go to hell,
That makes sense. And one of the other scriptures that I want to bring up on is 1 Corinthians 13 and 7. And 1 Corinthians 13, 7 says, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. That seems like, man, if you had a scripture that was yours, that you worked down to the bone, it would be enduring all things. That all of was that a cognitive thought? Like, all this trauma and this trouble that I'm doing, this is part of God's plan, and I'm enduring all things. Do you think about that? Is that something, or were you just like...
No, I don't think I really thought about it consciously.
Okay.
Consciously.
Because it really is like an interesting, that makes you more susceptible to putting up with a lot of things that are wrong. If you're like, oh, well, this is just part of God's plan, I'm enduring all things. The scripture, 1 Corinthians 13, 7. It seems like that would be a good way to manipulate people into just putting up with all kind of bullshit.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I just might not remember the scripture, but, I remember that being, feeling like, this is how it is, and, I'll get through it.
Yeah, yeah. Because, that had been your whole life.
Yeah, literally.
You were enduring every day. It was probably like just looking at a calendar. So there's been a few times in my life where I was in situations where I had to endure stuff. I went to basic training for the military. I've been in a lot of military training that I was just like, man, this freaking sucks. Every day sucks. even my mission, like it would suck most of the time. I don't like talking to people about religion. I don't want to walk people up to complete strangers.
Oh my gosh, I know.
I'm an introvert. I don't like to do that stuff. So, when it was cold and, people were very nice, but it's not how I wanted to spend my 19-year and 20-year birthdays.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to spend. But I remember for me, I always had a calendar, and that's how I survived everything, is I knew when I was going to be done.
Oh.
I could look at the calendar and go, I'm here at basic training for 3 months, but August 22nd or whatever, I'm going to be done. And so I was able to endure everything I could, and it's been that way forever. Every class I go to, I'm like, oh, it's 2 months in North Dakota this time. Devil's Lake, woohoo, but I could look at a calendar and go, okay, well, I get home on, February 3rd, 27th or whatever. And it helped me get through it. How on earth did you get through all this without having an end date? It was just like, oh, this is going to be forever.
I mean, it felt like it was going to be forever.
How did you, what got you through it?
I think my kids, once I started having kids, they gave me joy, and it just kind of melted away all the external bullshit because I was able to focus on them and give them all my love.
So you focused on the here and the now and the little things that you could appreciate and didn't look at it as a slog through the future or whatever, to the future. Okay. Interesting.
I mean, you have to do,
you got to do
to survive.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I want to talk about, I didn't start the timer, so I have no idea how much time we have or anything. So we talked a little bit about towards the latter after you got back to Oregon after that whole crazy Mexico experience. And I know that in your heart of hearts, you probably thought it was just going to be calm and chill.
Yeah.
You're going to go back to OHS, to your job, and you're going to be chill, and you're going to get a job, and mom's going to do whatever. And then boy, did the wheels fall off that bus pretty quick. I mean, didn't take too long.
Yeah, it was a couple of years.
Couple of years before. And we've kind of talked about some of the possible reasons why that was, death of a mother. That I've heard so many stories about guys who just lose their minds after their mother dies.
Yeah, that's one. I mean, things weren't ever really, happy home life. He always had a abusive tendency, and but early on it was more focused towards the boys. And then after his mom passed away, then it just escalated really bad. He became an alcoholic. I mean, he had always been a drinker, but he'd have a case that would last him a week. And then it got to the point where he was drinking a case of beer every day, 2 cases of beer a day. And then he started becoming more abusive. And that all happened right after his mom passed away.
Was he like an angry drunk?
No. He never really got drunk. That was the weird thing. I had only seen him drunk one time.
So what was the effect of the alcohol then?
I don't know.
No, but I'm asking, what?
Oh, what was it on him?
Yeah, because you said, he started drinking. Well, how did that affect you and him and the family?
I mean, the drinking, the drinking didn't seem to affect him in any type of way. He never got drunk, or he didn't have these personality changes. I think the drinking just kind of became part of, just hand in hand with his escalating behavior and his anger. I don't know. It didn't seem. I don't know if that was his coping mechanism, drinking.
Yeah, that's a lot of times what people. Okay, but so you're saying that his angriness or his anger and his lack of patience or whatever, treating the family badly, however you want to term that, wasn't specifically because of the drinking. That was just something he did that you noticed that?
Yeah. So the bad behavior didn't come with the drinking. Like when he was drinking, he acted the same as when he wasn't drinking. Like his personality never changed.
Okay.
He was just always kind of angry, and everyone was always on edge around him. And
he'd come home.
He
just
was
a chip
always
on his
ready
shoulder.
to lash out at anyone for anything. Yeah, like I go to the store when he, if he wouldn't notice, like we'd go to the store, I'd take the kids to McDonald's and we get them, I'd get them some Happy Meals and stuff, and we'd have to get rid of all of the evidence before he got home because he'd get pissed if he saw that we went out to go get McDonald's instead of me cooking because I'm too lazy, I should be cooking instead of getting McDonald's, which I did, 99% of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to get a Happy Meal every once in a while.
Right. So I take it your communication with him wasn't that great. Like, were you able to, like, did you ever try, like, talking to him, like, hey, what's going on with you? Like, or
no,
was that
really.
Nothing you could even do?
I think a part of it is with their culture. Like, you don't talk about feelings.
What about behavior? Like when he loses his shit and you go, hey, what's going on? Do you want to talk?
No,
that was not a thing. Huh?
No, he was never approachable.
The women just cower and hide in a corner or something. I think that's a cultural sign. I mean, honestly, that's just emotional intelligence. A lack of emotional intelligence is what that is. And I hate to blanketly say some cultures are like that and lack, but I think that might be the case, but I'm not going to definitively say that because I'm sure there are Mexican households down in Mexico and in many other countries who have a lot of emotional intelligence, don't put up with, don't do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know enough about that culture to say that, but it's definitely a lack of emotional intelligence. If you can't have one conversation with someone, you got some, like, that's a crazy way to live. That's a crazy way to live.
I know.
Like, who would live like that? But I'm sure there are other places over in the Middle East that are a lot like that too. To name a few. So something that I thought was interesting, I wanted to point out because we had our story about the flippin' Echo Mountain fire and the ice storm and the flood and the disasters at Wandering Spirit, right? When you and I finally got together. After you were living with Nazi meth head roommates and stuff like that. But you got through that stuff. Which,
I mean, I didn't know.
Well, after what you'd been through, it's kind of hard to know what normal looks like. How do you recognize it?
When you have never lived in, like it had been, 12, like I hadn't been living in the outside world exposed to it in a really long, like forever. I didn't know like signs, like what do drug dealers look like?
Right.
Like what are their habits? What are their routines? What are their red flags? I had no fucking clue.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it kind of reminds me of, I get that, honestly. I get that because, I grew up in a Mormon household, right? I lived in Utah. I went to college in Utah. I went to a Mormon school before I went on my mission. I had never been around drugs. I had never been around any of that stuff. I was very sheltered. So then I go over to Holland and, it's a very progressive country. It's a very progressive country. So, you go to Amsterdam. Imagine a 19-year-old me walking through Amsterdam like a little Mormon missionary. Like, I didn't know what was going on. I looked down there and there's like, that's the red light district. We don't go down that way. So I feel that a little bit like I wouldn't have known what to reckon. I wouldn't have recognized it either. I mean, the first time I saw someone freebasing cocaine on a train was wild. I was like sitting there and I had my missionary companion. He was older than I was. He'd been out there like a year longer. So he knew a lot more stuff. He'd seen some crazy stuff too. And I'm like, what is that guy doing with the lighter and that spoon? And he's like, oh, just don't look at him. Don't make eye contact. I'm like, okay, but what the heck is he doing? Oh, he's freebasing cocaine. Like right in the middle of everyone on this. It wasn't like a Amtrak train. It was the tram is what they call it. It's basically like a trolley that goes through the street, like a trolley.
Oh, like the San Francisco trolley.
Yeah, yeah. Like it wasn't the ones underground because they have those too. This was the one that goes down flipping Main Street.
Oh my god!
Above the ground in Rotterdam, and it was like, yeah, he's out there freebasing cocaine right in front of everybody, God and everybody. I was like, I am not in Kansas anymore. So I get it. I'd never had any Nazi meth head roommates, but close. Somebody freebasing on cocaine on the on the tram was a little bit of an eye opener for sure. But one thing I thought was very interesting is the disasters that you and I endured at Wandering Spirit, which is avoid at all costs. It is definitely built on an Indian burial ground, native burial ground, full show. Anyway, it really is a really interesting metaphor for this journey of yours, if you really break it down. So when every human system fails, like all of the things that happen at Wandering Spirit, all these things, you're left to face the elements and eventually finding that the only true authority worth obeying is your own instinct for self-preservation. That you can't count on the system.
Yeah.
You can't, we got lucky in a lot of cases where we're close to the fire, but not right in it. And we almost had a tree fall on us, but it was 10 feet away. And almost had, the flood reach our doorstep. It was like 5 feet away. So we got as close as you can to being engulfed in natural disasters. But I feel like, what a metaphor, because you made it through all of this crazy trauma from age 13 through 35, something like that.
Yeah.
Almost dying several times, almost getting put in jail, probably in some, Mexican prison somewhere. Almost, you just made it through by the skin of your teeth. And I like to think that someone's looking out for you. I don't know who it is. Whatever God is looking out for you is like, and when we finally found each other, we always tell each other, like, look, we put up with so much crap that we deserve this kind of moment of peace, right?
Yes.
I mean, so do you see that kind of as being an interesting metaphor?
Yeah.
Like, it's such, like, all wrapped up in.
Well, it's funny because, before it was like the cult and all the crazy husbands and all of that stuff trying to break me. And none of that really broke me. And then all of these, Mother Nature forces trying to break me. And well, they didn't really break me either.
Yeah. And honestly, the way I looked at it at the time was I was so madly in love with you and still am, but I was so madly in love with you that anything could have happened and it'd been like, oh, we'll figure it out.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
It was like, oh,
you're just floating on clouds.
Because after, and I think that's a good way of looking at it. It's like when your relationship is solid and you are on the same page and you're communicating about everything, boy, does it make crazy life stuff just, it makes it so you can endure it.
Yeah.
A lot easier.
I agree.
If you're fighting with your spouse or just...
And that's what I get. To this day, we still haven't fought, and we've almost been married 5 years. And we still have not had one fight.
We have not.
And, I think it's all about communication. Like, there's no reason to be fighting. You both are adults. You can sit your happy asses down and talk it out. Like, why need to bring the drama in? Come on, Nancy.
Well, I mean, egos get involved and hurt feelings get involved. And if you there's also like people feeling insecure. That's a big one, insecurity. And then, there's so many other things that get involved and start clouding everything.
It's all bullshit.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so this last part if you have, I have these things right here. So I'm going to put things on the screen so that you can see some of this stuff. So the first one I'm going to put on is this wonderful, what is this called? Is this his,
It's when it was after the first 50,000, the first $500,000 bail that he was granted. He fled down to Mexico, and then he got caught coming back up from Mexico and was extradited to Oregon, and then they released him on another $500,000 bail. So like he fled the country, he came back illegally. Like, isn't that a pretty obvious sign of a flight risk? Like it wasn't no one's word. Like he was caught by Border Patrol coming back illegally.
For sure. So we're going to put all these on the screen. You're going to see this one here. This is, what is this?
Well, no,
this
you don't need to show that.
I don't need to show
that. He has three charges.
Okay.
That were ever processed from the DA's office. And all of this other stuff was active. There's notes, but you can't show this because it has information.
Got it.
But I was requesting police records because I like to keep my records. So I was requesting police records of all of these different cases. And every single one, except for the child one, every single one said active in DA's office or active with DA. Active with DA's office. So like, because he never showed and was prosecuted and indicted for this stuff because he kept fleeing the country, they never even,
They never got to be able to charge him for that other stuff. So let's talk through, and really simply, I'm going to put it on the screen so people can see the timeline along with the fine and the bail, and how the state of Oregon, and specifically the DA in Clackamas County, how they operated. And if anybody has an explanation for this, I would love to hear it, because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So the first time was a $5,000 bail that was because he ignored a restraining order.
Yes.
And what was the date on that one? Do you have that?
It was no, I don't. It was in 2018.
Okay, so 2018, he goes through a restraining order that you had, and they picked him up, put him in jail. For how long was he over there? Overnight?
Yeah, I think just overnight.
And
or
then
a
they
few hours.
granted a $50,000 bail, which means he had to pay $5,000.
Yeah.
So in case you are new to how bail works, it means this is the way it's supposed to work. The judge says this is how much you go to jail unless you can pay this amount, but you don't actually pay this amount. You're paying 10% of whatever the judge says to hold that promises. You make a promise, basically says that you will show up for your court date. And then once you go through the court date, your bail can be either returned to you or you go to jail. Yeah. And maybe both. It might be returned to you and then you go to jail, or you're let free, whatever the court may say. So in this case, there was a $50,000 bail. That means you pay 10% to a bail bondsman. That bail bondsman guarantees that
we don't have bail bondsmen in Oregon.
Okay. Well, what do you have? Just a court? It's actually through
the court.
The court. Some states have a bail bondsman who does basically the same thing. They just hold your money, and you forfeit that money if you don't show up for your court date.
Yeah.
But in this case, if you pay the court 10% of $5,000 for it, and then you don't make your court date, that means you owe the full $50,000 to the court if it happens again. Like, do they put a warrant out for you and say you owe the court $50,000 because you skipped bail? Right? That's how that works.
I think it's called a bench warrant.
Bench warrant for So that's $50,000 right off the bat. But did he make that second court appearance?
He went like a status check, I think is what it's called. He went to a couple status checks, and then the new charges were brought in.
Okay, so just to be clear, so we have a $50,000 bail. He pays $5,000. he does show up for that court. He's checking in for that one. So he didn't run from that one. But the $500,000 one, he paid $50,000. Somehow he's getting cash from his family, or he's squirreled it away. He's probably squirreled it away from all the money he took from you over the years. So he pays that, and he continues to be a shithead and does all kinds of crazy shit, going back and forth like we talked about. And then he ultimately, before the court date happens, he runs off to Mexico. So that means he owes the court $500,000. Not $50,000. He already paid $50,000. That's 10% of it, right? So he owes the court $500,000. He owes the court. Then a little time goes by, and he is still pissed off and still wants to get revenge. So what does he do? He does another coyote trip through Tucson. Anyway. So people come up through Tucson. That's a common place to come up through. So he comes up through Tucson, and he's nabbed by the Border Patrol, because they're pretty awesome down there, I will say. So they nab him, and what do? They see that he has a bench warrant for $500,000 and wanted for rape, 2 charges of rape and assault in the 4th degree. That they see that he is wanted for that.
And they talk about the homicide.
And the attempted homicide in Mexico, even that made it up through to Oregon and through to Arizona. So that's all the information they have. So what does Arizona do? They do the proper thing. Mm-hmm. They extradite him to Oregon, which is where he wanted to go anyway, by the way, because that's where his ex-wife lives, who he wanted to murder. Okay, so let's be clear on that fucking bullshit, because this just infuriates me. So they gave him a free trip. He didn't have to buy a $100 bus ticket or a $300 plane ticket or steal a car and come up with $100 in gas to get up to Portland. He got a free trip from the fucking feds, who got him from Tucson to Oregon. What do you think happened once he got to Oregon? What did they do, babe? Tell us.
Give him another $500,000 bail.
Another $500,000 bail. So he skips. He has a bench warrant for one $500,000 bail that he paid $50,000 for. What did they do? They offered him another one for $50,000. In Oregon, where do you think the money, when you pay your 10% of your bail, where do you think that goes to?
The court?
Goes to the bottom line of the court. Of course, it goes to the court. It goes to the collection fees. It goes to the bottom line. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's a corporation, right? So it doesn't go to housing, and it doesn't go to the poor and the needy. No. It goes to a fancy parking spot, or I don't know. Maybe somebody can trace that money, but I am highly suspicious of this.
Yeah.
Highly.
He was already proven to be a flight risk. He already fled. They literally caught him coming back illegally from Mexico. So you can't say he wasn't a flight risk.
He flew once already. He already they knew he was going to fly. He literally showed them that he can fly. But you know what? Here's the thing. With someone like that, they know he has enough money in Mexico that he can pay the 10%. They'll never get $500,000 from him. But they can take the $50,000 and run with it. And if they keep giving it to him, then he has to keep paying. But if you just throw him in jail, what do you think the court gets?
Cost, because it costs to maintain a person.
They don't get $50,000. They literally, instead of doing the right thing and taking this monster off the streets and protecting the women that he is around and his ex-wife and his children, instead of protecting them and doing what's right for the people of Oregon, the court looked at it and said, you know what? We can't get that first $500,000 because nobody has $500,000.
No.
Not some immigrant from Mexico. But he already showed us he can get us $50,000. And I sure would like a nice new yacht. So what do? They do it. They post another $500,000 bail. And what does he do? He posts another $50,000, doesn't he?
Yep.
So at this point, he's paid $100,000 of, I'm sure, Angela's money that she saved over the 10-year marriage.
And who knows? I mean, he had friends that were coyotes and stuff. So, he could have had connections.
He's getting it from some illegal operation somewhere. But they knew he could come up with it because he already did. If he wasn't going to post, he would have just stayed in jail and they wouldn't have gotten any money. I mean, what are the police going to do? They're the ones that capture the criminals and then send them to jail, and then they have a court date, and then it's not on them. They wash their hands of it. Then it's on the judicial system. It's on the DA. It's on the prosecuting attorneys, and it's on the judges to make sure that justice is done. In this case, it is so egregiously nonsense that it is such a scam that they're pulling up there.
Yeah.
If he'd have found you, I mean, you didn't make it easy for him.
No.
Like, you were running around. You were constantly on the move for how many years? 3, 4 years? 3 years?
Yeah, 3 years.
Like, just going from one place to another, uprooting your kids.
Yeah.
Like,
they went to so many different schools.
Yeah.
They were so behind in school when we finally were safe enough to settle down somewhere.
Yeah, and then COVID hit. Oh my gosh, we don't want to talk about that.
That was horrible.
Those poor kids went through so much for that. But I mean, we need to look at that and just be like, something needs to be done. And I don't know what we can do. We're just two lonely voices out here in the wilderness.
Yeah, and since his arrest warrant for Mexico had been translated by the U.S. Embassy or someone like that, I can't remember who sealed the papers, but it was certified translated for U.S. agency enforcement. And the DA had the attempted murder warrant. They had all that stuff on him. So
they knew all of the whole crazy
story. They knew the stuff
story
from Mexico, yeah.
So after he gets out the second time, it sounds to me, well, he sticks around for a little bit longer, doesn't he?
Up until the day before the trial. We didn't. His lawyer had been in communication with him up until the day before trial.
Okay.
And then the day of the trial, he no-showed. Immigration was there waiting for him, but he no-showed to court.
Do you think his judge or his lawyer told him immigration was going to be there and that's why he left? It's a sanctuary city. I wouldn't put it past any the judge, the DA, or the defense attorney that someone let him know, somebody told him that ICE was going to be there and he was going to be deported.
They told me, the investigator told me that ICE was going to be there. So I knew ahead of time. I knew ahead of the trial.
It's interesting. Here's something I hadn't thought about. Like, if you're an immigrant, you marry an American citizen, but you don't go through the paperwork to get naturalized, then you get a divorce. Then you're done. Like, you go back, right? You're not naturalized. You're not a citizen. You don't automatically, I think that's something that people don't understand, is you don't automatically become a citizen when you marry.
No, you have to do your paperwork. You have to go through the interview process. They have to check your background, make sure that you're not committing any crimes, and you have to pay a fine for coming into the country illegally.
Okay. So he did none of that stuff, right? Or he did some of it, you said. You went through...
Right at the end, we started some of it, but I never went through with it.
Okay. So that's why even after he was married to an American citizen, he still is on the run. And now as far as we know, he went back down to Mexico. I mean, hopefully he stays there. I think it would be a pretty scary prospect for him to come up here, because I have a feeling ICE would nab him immediately and throw him in the gulag.
Alligator Alcatraz.
Yeah, alligator Alcatraz. But that's where we find ourselves, and it's just infuriating when you look at the failures. But this is one that is in black and white. I can see it on paper, and we're going to show it on the screen. Like, this case is egregiously it's such a scam. No one is going to be able to tell me or explain to me or a justification for this. Letting someone out like that. No one. And I don't think this would pass the sniff test for anyone. I'd love to get an attorney on here, an actual licensed attorney, and walk through your court cases and all your stuff. Because I think it would be really interesting to hear, an attorney look at this stuff. Just boy, maybe we don't want to do that because they would lose all faith in the justice system that they're supposed to be working for, But oh my gosh.
And there's just so much.
It's, and everybody always says be your own advocate. And since I met you, you've always have your ducks in a row. You have all your evidence and you have everything filed away and categorized for everything. I mean, some of this stuff is 20 years old. You have the paperwork for stuff that happened a long time ago, but man, it's like you need, I don't know how you do it. How does the common person do it? You need a law degree and money.
Well, and I'm a firm believer in evidence because words are just words, but you have evidence and that kind of trumps any words, So I've always been a firm believer in evidence for anything, People need proof of something. If whoever has proof is probably going to win.
Yeah. And you've had that situation happen in court before, right? Like tell me that one story again about how you just laid all your stuff out and just like boom, boom, boom. Which one was that?
Well, one of them was one, we were renting this townhome and the pipes broke underneath the house, one of the water pipes.
Okay.
And we didn't know that it had broke until we started seeing mold come up from behind the toilet in one of the bathrooms. And so we reached out to the manager and we're like, hey, there's some mold coming up. So she sent someone out and then they were looking around and they realized there was a water leak and there was a broken pipe underneath the house. And so we didn't have flooring in that bathroom for like 2 or 3 months. And so basically we weren't able to use that bathroom at all because that's how they were getting underneath the house to redo all the piping. And then they had to redo, all the remodeling for the mold and the new drywall and all that stuff. So it took a long time. And it had to dry out. So they couldn't do any work until everything dried out. It was a big process. It was like 2 or 3 months. And we weren't able to use that whole bathroom and the affected bedroom that was adjacent to that because the mold was on that side of the wall too, but not through the floor part. And so I told her I wanted a discount on my rent because we weren't using that bathroom and that space, that
Seems
bathroom.
Reasonable. That's reasonable.
And she said no. And I said, well, if you say no, then I'm going to take it to small claims court. And she's like, you're not going to win, but if you think you need to, do it. And so I calculated out, what the rent was, divided that by how much square foot, measured the bathroom and the bedroom.
Took photos.
That I wasn't used. I had all the pictures. I measured up the unusable square feet of the townhome. And I subtracted that from the corresponding amount of rent that pertained to that amount of square feet. Yeah. And I went in and I said, I want compensation for these 3 months for this amount of square feet. And on average, this is how much my electricity went up because she had a big commercial fan and they were running them 24/7 to dry stuff out. And we had to increase in our electricity.
So you calculated your electricity as well.
Yeah.
Like, dang. Okay. Yeah.
But I had all the evidence and I wasn't being unreasonable. Right. I mean, it was pretty fucking reasonable what I was saying. I didn't use that space because of your work, so I shouldn't pay for that space because you're inhabiting that space doing your work. Right.
And so what did the judge say?
I won. She had 3 days to pay me.
I bet she wasn't very happy, huh?
No. She gave us bullshit nonstop after that.
Yeah.
We ended up moving out not too long after because she just became a pain in the butt.
Well, anyway, I'm glad you won. I love that story because it just shows if you have your ducks in a row and you do your research and you do your calculations and you're reasonable,
you
can win. But this, unreasonable. Ugh. Anyway.
I know. And the fact that, every time he was released, he would just menace the hell out of us.
Yeah.
It was just so unbearable. And all of that could have been prevented if the DA and the judge would have just done their job.
He was a violent felon that they let harass his ex-wife.
and children.
And didn't care because they wanted the $50,000 bail. I guarantee that goes into some slush fund or some bullshit thing.
Like he kidnapped one of his daughters before that second bail. And that's one of the cases that they had in the DA's office.
One of the police reports.
Yeah, it was active in the DA's office. So like he kidnapped his daughter that he wasn't have to have there was a no contact order. He kidnapped her for 24 hours or 36 hours.
Wow. This makes me think of another scripture. Okay, and this I'm going to bring it around. Okay, towards down here. Matthew 7:15-16. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you shall know them. So obviously, all of these people, everybody we've talked to so far, are wolves in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
They are false prophets. You know, we have the judicial system who's there to do justice, to take care of us. And what do? All they care about is the bail. They want the bail money, and they release them right back into there.
Yep, throw you to the wolves.
And when you look at the cult, what is the fruit? The fruit is broken marriages, child brides, federal indictments, traumatized survivors. And there's no amount of Bible study that's going to cover the smell of that particular load of bullshit. Yeah.
No.
So, I think that it's interesting when you're looking at any institution, whether it be religion or financial institution, as we've had many examples over the past few years with housing crises and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and all that, or you're looking at governmental institutions or healthcare institutions. I'm sure we've all got examples of healthcare institutions that have failed, not to mention insurance companies. Let's not even get started on that.
Oh, gosh.
But anytime you look at, you can recognize these false institutions. The scripture says false prophets, but the falsity of it and the falsehood is by the fruits. Look at what they're producing. Look at what they're doing, and you can see whether or not they're good or not. So I like that scripture. That's one of my favorites because it does give you a little bit of insight into, how do I discern whether this person that I know or that I see, or this institution or this situation is good or not. Well, you can usually tell by their fruits you shall know them. Right?
Yeah.
So, well, that's all I have for you for today. And I think, it's going to be you and Adria and I think Nico. Yeah, we're going to get him some headphones. He's coming on, and hopefully that will be an amazing situation. We'll get some more people on here, some fresh faces.
Yep.
And so that'll be interesting. It'll be fun. Get maybe even more. We'll start fleshing out other viewpoints from the cult. Because as we've talked about it, Angela's viewpoint is from a child and a child bride and a woman's perspective. But when you have what's going on with the men and that perspective, that's a whole lot darker in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like for whatever reason, and thank God that it was this way, it seems like you were protected from a lot of the worst.
It sure seems
like it. It turns out.
Yeah.
Even as bad and weird and crazy and dark as it has been,
it still could have been worse.
Boy, could it have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
So we thank our lucky stars every day, I think, for that the women were separated. It wasn't as egregious, and that you didn't have to endure what a lot of other people did in the cult. So it's going to be interesting. You're going to be able, I think we'll be able to see a lot fuller picture of it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all comes to play together.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we have a few more guests besides him coming on too. I think that we've talked about possibly having come on.
I think so.
All right. Well,
growing project.
All right.
The more the merrier.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, well, if anyone has any questions for us about any of the podcast episodes, feel free to email us at squirrelbrainstories@gmail.com. You can find us on all social media platforms, all streaming platforms, YouTube, Apple, whatever, Apple Play or Apple Music. I don't know what it is.
Apple Podcasts.
Oh, yeah. Spotify. And we're on all the social media. You can just look for us, Squirrel Brain Stories. The next podcast will be interesting. We're gonna change things a little bit. We're gonna have a 3-person podcast going on. It'll be Adria and I and our friend Nico, who's also one of the victims. So it's gonna be a little new experience, and it's gonna be exciting to see Nico and all of his courage and strength he's accumulated over the years, and finally get the stuff off his shoulder.
Yeah, and this podcast is just a basement project, right? I mean, this is just something we're doing from our basement dungeon that we put together, and it's a homegrown kind of situation, and we're just flying by the seat of our pants. So we would appreciate you sharing it. If you come across this and you like it, share it with everybody that you know. And if you come across, if people come across the shorts or whatever, watch them, watch the episode, and share it with your family and friends that you think might be interested in that, in this kind of topic.
Yeah. Because these kind of things happen right under everyone's noses, right in the middle of town. It doesn't have to be a third world country.
It certainly doesn't. We have proven that there's a lot going on that people need held accountable for.
Yep, exactly. Okay, well, until next time, everyone, thank you and goodbye.